Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where roads are dusty, journeys are long, and yes, you have no comfy Uber or Indian railways to save you. Instead, you're stuck with bare feet, creaky carts, and a lot of patience. Imagine the warm air clinging to your skin, the smell of earth after a faint drizzle, and a road that stretches out so far you almost wonder if it loops around the entire world. That's your setting tonight. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this trip without sore feet, a sunburn, and maybe a snake bite or two. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what the local time is there. It's fun to imagine this story carrying you across time zones while you drift off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of an ancient road in India, the kind not paved with asphalt but with flattened earth, where the footprints of countless travelers before you have mixed into one long, dusty trail. The sun hovers above, a golden coin in the sky, and you sense that this path isn't just for your sleepy stroll tonight. It's been walked for centuries by merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and the poor souls who had nothing better to do than chase distant horizons. You adjust your imaginary bundle over your shoulder. It's lighter than it should be, probably because your brain is already halfway asleep, and you step onto the trail. The ground crunches faintly beneath you. Dust clings to your ankles. To your left, a banyan tree leans into the path, its roots snaking down like they're trying to grab hold of history itself. Somewhere in the branches, a crow caws like it knows something you don't. Maybe it's warning you. Or maybe it's just laughing at you for not bringing proper shoes. As you move forward, you can almost feel how this road has been shaped by human willpower. Traders from the south once pushed peppercorns along this way, tiny black seeds so valuable they could pay for an entire house. Pilgrims trudged barefoot, chanting verses under their breath, convinced that every blister earned them spiritual credit. And soldiers? Well, they stomped through with heavy armor, probably sweating buckets under that metal while thinking, why did I sign up for this? Scholars still argue whether these pathways were maintained by kings for state control or simply formed by centuries of repeated footsteps. Either way, the result is the same: an endless artery of human ambition cutting across India's wild landscapes. The air around you is alive with little details. You pass a stray dog that doesn't belong to anyone but seems to be everyone's companion, trotting down the road like it's on its own pilgrimage. A few feet away, a woman balances a clay pot of water on her head so gracefully that you briefly question your own ability to stand upright. The smell of burning cow dung wafts from a distant village fire. Not exactly the candlelit spa scent you were hoping for, but hey, welcome to realism. Traveling like this isn't just about moving from one place to another. It's about surrendering to slowness. You can't rush because there's no way to rush. Even if you hopped onto the back of a Bullock cart, you'd still crawl along at the speed of snail who just had a heavy lunch. This is why people plan journeys around seasons, aligning their pace with the rhythms of monsoons and harvests. And then there's the quirky stuff. For instance, did you know travelers in some regions tied little bells to their ankles at night so snakes wouldn't slither too close while they slept outdoors? Imagine lying under the stars, a soft breeze brushing against your skin, while your ankles jingle faintly like you're a one-person midnight band. It sounds kind of silly, but out here, survival was always balanced on the edge of creativity. Your eyes trace the horizon. Ahead, the road forks one path leading toward the coast where traders dream of spice-laden ships, the other vanishing into forests where bandits and wild animals lurk. For now, you keep moving straight, savoring the calm rhythm of your steps. You realize that journeys like this weren't measured in kilometers or miles, but in how many rivers you crossed, how many nights you spent under the open sky, and how many times you promised yourself that the next town would finally be just over that hill. There's a sleepy charm in imagining yourself here. No buzzing phone, no honking traffic, just you, the earth beneath, and the sense that the road itself is your only guide. The sound of your breathing mixes with the faint rustle of leaves. Your thoughts begin to slow. This is where the ancient Indian traveler's story begins. Not with grand processions or royal parades, but with the humble act of stepping onto a dusty road, not entirely sure what lies ahead, but trusting that it will take you somewhere worth reaching. And as you walk, the world behind you fades, and the world ahead feels like a dream waiting to be wandered into. Section 2. You keep moving along that dusty road, and soon the horizon opens wider, like the whole subcontinent is inviting you into its arms. The path isn't smooth, it dips into shallow ruts carved by wheels and hooves, then rises again where the ground is baked hard by the sun. Every step you take kicks up a little cloud of powder that clings to your sandals, or maybe to your bare feet, depending on how rustic you're feeling tonight. The heat presses down on your shoulders, and the air smells faintly of dry grass. The world around you is quieter than modern ears. Expect no engines, no honks, no screeching brakes, just the rhythmic creak of wooden wheels somewhere far ahead, the occasional lowing of cattle, and the slap of your own footsteps. Even birds seem to fly slower here, as if they know the pace of life on these roads is deliberately unhurried. As you wander deeper into this scene, you realize these roads aren't just travel routes. They're lifelines. They carry grain from villages to markets, gossip from one town to another, and whispers of rebellion that no royal spy can completely suppress. In fact, historians have traced some of these paths all the way back to the Mauryan Empire, more than 2,000 years ago. They were so well worn that even centuries later, travelers like you could still follow the same footprints without losing the trail. Scholars still argue whether the empire deliberately planned these roads like a massive grid, or whether they were simply the natural outcome of trade and pilgrimage repeating itself endlessly. The quirky thing is, roads like these weren't always respected by locals. Some villages saw them as dirty, risky places filled with strangers, and so they'd build their houses slightly away from the main trail. Yet, paradoxically, those same villagers relied on the road for everything from salt to stories. Imagine living close enough to smell the dust of passing caravans but still keeping your distance because you never know what kind of person might come along. You keep walking, and the endlessness of it all starts to weigh on your mind. On the left, a line of neem trees shades the path, their leaves whispering secrets in the breeze. On the right, a farmer trudges behind his bull, plowing soil so dry it looks more like cracked pottery than fertile earth. He glances at you for a moment, then looks away as if travelers like you are too common to be worth a second thought. It's funny, isn't it? To us, walking this road feels like stepping into another dimension, but to him it's just Tuesday. The trail stretches ahead, and you begin to notice how monotonous yet comforting it is. The same crunch, the same rhythm, the same golden light sinking lower on the horizon. Your mind drifts how many people before you must have walked this exact section, muttering prayers, humming songs, or cursing the heat. Maybe they left faint traces in the dust, traces that vanish but still echo in some invisible way. The fact you cling to, like a pebble in your pocket, is this. India's Grand Trunk Road, one of the oldest highways in the world, was once just a series of such dusty tracks, slowly stitched together by kings, merchants, and the sheer stubbornness of human feet. Centuries later, it became a highway that stretched for thousands of kilometers. But tonight, for you, it's still just this dust, silence, and the long stretch of horizon that looks like it might swallow you whole. A little odd detail catches your eye now. Along the path, you see small stone cairns, piles of rocks stacked one on top of another. Travelers used to build them as markers, leaving a silent message. Yes, someone came this way. You're not alone. Some cairns were practical, guiding the lost. Others, well, they might have been just bored people killing time before the next village. You smile at the thought humanity hasn't changed that much, has it? Your pace slows. The light softens, turning from harsh gold to a mellow orange that bathes the road in something almost tender. Shadows grow longer, and the world feels less threatening. For a moment, you could almost believe you're walking through a memory, or a half-remembered dream of how travel once was. Slow, patient, and utterly unconcerned with deadlines. Every crunch of your step reminds you that this road has no end in sight. Yet somehow, that doesn't feel like a problem. The journey is the destination, and the dust rising behind you is proof that, at least for tonight, you're part of something bigger and older than you can really comprehend. Section 3. Your feet keep carrying you forward, and soon the dusty road narrows into a trail that feels less like a trade route and more like a pilgrimage path. The air shifts here quieter. So, this was, after all, a privilege reserved for the elite. Ordinary folk walked. The somewhat better-off folks rode carts. But palanquins? That was for the ones who could afford to put dignity above discomfort. And, fun fact, in certain kingdoms, even high-ranking courtesans or temple dancers traveled in palanquins, shaded from the sun as their presence caused half the village to peek out of their doorways. Scholars still argue whether the palanquin was originally a status symbol imported from neighboring cultures, or whether it developed locally as an obvious solution for people who had both wealth and weak knees. And here's a quirky little detail for you. Some palanquins had bells tied to their tops, not for decoration, but to warn people on the road to step aside. The sound of those bells was less gentle chime and more, "Get out of the way before we run you over." Imagine the humiliation of being told off by a bell while trudging barefoot in the dust. As the palanquin passes, you fall into step behind it for a while, almost hypnotized by the sway. The bearers chant softly under their breath, a rhythm to keep their pace steady. Their feet slap against the dirt in unison, their voices rising and falling like waves. The passenger inside shifts now and then, making the curtains sway slightly. You wonder what it must feel like, half floating, half rocking, lulled into a dreamy state by the steady lift and fall of human shoulders. There's something almost ASMR about it. The creak of the poles, the rustle of the curtains, the soft thud of synchronized footsteps. Even from outside, it lulls you into a sleepy calm. If you weren't careful, you'd probably nod off right here on the roadside, snoring under the nearest neem tree. But there's also a darker side to it. Palanquin bearers had grueling jobs. They walked miles every day, often barefoot, carrying people who sometimes weighed more than they'd like to admit. They earned little, suffered sore shoulders, and were invisible in the stories that celebrated the luxury of their passengers. To you, their chants sound soothing, but to them, maybe they were just survival mantras to keep exhaustion from winning. You keep walking, and eventually, the palanquin veers off toward a walled compound, likely a noble's rest house. You stay on the main road, but the image lingers. In your mind, you're still rocking gently, still half drifting in that cushioned sway, even though your actual feet are back on the dusty trail. And maybe that's the oddest part about ancient travel. You could move at a snail's pace, or you could be carried like royalty. But in the end, the road swallowed everyone the same way. Dust on your ankles, sweat on your brow, and a horizon that always looked just out of reach. Section 6. You leave behind the palanquin's fading bells, and soon the road widens again, curling toward a settlement where the ground is strangely dented, as though giant footprints had pressed it down. And then you hear it, a deep, thunderous rumble, like a drumbeat carried on the earth itself. An elephant. Your steps slow instinctively. The first thing you see is its trunk, swinging lazily from side to side, dust rising in soft puffs wherever it touches the ground. Then comes the massive gray body, adorned with painted patterns on its forehead and draped with cloth embroidered in gold and red. On its back sits a wooden howdah, like a balcony strapped to muscle and bone, and inside that howdah, reclining comfortably, is someone who clearly doesn't plan on walking anytime soon. The royal procession lumbers past you. Servants scatter ahead, clearing the way with shouted warnings. A drummer beats rhythmically, each thud echoing through your chest like a second heartbeat. Guards walk alongside with spears, their expressions a mixture of boredom and pride. And at the center of it all, the elephant walks with a kind of serene arrogance, as if it knows the road was built purely for its steps. For centuries, elephants were the luxury vehicles of India. Kings rode them into battle, nobles displayed them during festivals, and traders even rented them for hauling heavy cargo across tricky terrain. They weren't just transport, they were statements. A king on horseback was respectable. A king on an elephant? Untouchable. Scholars still argue whether elephants were more practical for long-distance marches or mainly symbolic, given how much food and water such colossal creatures required. Still, when you're standing here, craning your neck just to see its rider, it's hard to care about logistics. The sheer scale is overwhelming. You could fit 10 of you inside one footprint, and the sway of its walk feels like the earth itself rocking gently side to side. But here comes the quirky part. Elephants weren't exactly obedient. Some records mention processions halted for hours because an elephant decided it had seen a delicious tree branch. Once the trunk reached out, no king or general could convince it otherwise. Imagine being part of a grand royal parade, trumpets blaring, drums pounding, only for the entire show to stop because your noble steed wants a snack. That's ancient travel in a nutshell, half majesty, half comedy. As the procession continues, you notice the faces of villagers gathered at the roadside. Children squeal with delight, their hands pressed together in awe. Old men mutter blessings, convinced that seeing a royal elephant brings good luck. Merchants eye the crowd, calculating how many extra coins they'll make from today's spectacle. And you? You're caught in the middle, blinking at the sun, glinting off polished tusk ornaments, half mesmerized, half wondering if this is really practical or just very expensive theater. You let the royal party pass, the earth trembling slightly with every heavy step. The smell of sandalwood oil lingers in the air, mixed with the musky tang of the elephant itself. When the road is finally clear, silence settles back, broken only by the faint buzz of cicadas in the fields. You walk on, but your imagination keeps replaying that sway, the slow rise and fall of the elephant's massive shoulders, the feeling that you could almost fall asleep if you were rocked like that long enough. And maybe, in some dream version of this journey, you already are. For tonight, you don't ride the elephant, you simply follow the echoes of its steps, the soft thunder fading into the distance, carrying with it the weight of centuries of Indian kingship. Section 7. The echoes of the royal elephant fade, and in their place comes a different kind of sound water. A faint gurgle at first, then a steady rush, and finally the unmistakable slap of waves against wood. You're approaching a riverbank, and here, the road dissolves into rippling currents. India's rivers have always been highways in disguise. The Ganga, the Yamuna, the Godavari, these weren't just sacred waters for bathing or rituals. They were the arteries of movement, carrying people and goods far faster than any bullock cart could dream of. You step onto the muddy bank, where boats of all sizes bob lazily in the current. Some are tiny wooden canoes, barely large enough for 2 people and a goat. Others are flat-bottomed barges, stacked with grain sacks, oil jars, and baskets of mangoes. A few are brightly painted with swirls of red and blue, because apparently even ancient sailors like to show off. You climb aboard a small ferry, the planks creaking under your weight. The boatman, lean and sunburned, pushes off with a long bamboo pole. The boat wobbles dangerously for a second, then steadies as the current takes hold. The air cools instantly. A breeze ripples over the water, carrying with it the smell of mud, fish, and wet reeds. It's oddly refreshing after days of dust and sweat. The boat drifts downstream, and you begin to understand why river travel was so valued. No creaking wheels, no aching feet, no bullocks to feed. Just the gentle pull of water, moving you along at nature's pace. Traders loved this. They could haul entire shipments of rice or cotton on barges instead of struggling with carts on bumpy roads. Pilgrims used boats to reach ghats and temples. Even armies sometimes ferried across rivers to surprise their enemies. Scholars still argue whether India's inland waterways were more efficient than its land routes. But standing here, swaying gently on the deck, the answer feels obvious. Of course, rivers weren't always kind. Monsoon season could turn them into monsters. Torrents of rain would swell the banks, currents would roar, and boats like yours might capsize with little warning. Oddly enough, some communities adapted by building floating markets on calmer backwaters, entire bazaars set up on boats, where you could haggle for spices while drifting from one cellar to another. Imagine grocery shopping while your feet never touch solid ground. Quirky, yes, but surprisingly effective. As your ferry glides on, you watch life unfold along the banks. Farmers wash their oxen, scrubbing the animals with handfuls of river water. Women in bright saris kneel at the ghats, filling copper pots or letting wet cloths cling to their arms as they scrub laundry against smooth stones. Children leap in with reckless joy, splashing each other until their laughter carries across the river. And further downstream, fishermen balance expertly on narrow boats, casting nets that spread like silver fans before sinking into the current. The boatman steers toward midstream, where the water runs deeper and smoother. He hums a tune under his breath, something that sounds both ancient and timeless. The ferry rocks gently, and you lean against the railing, half drowsy, listening to the liquid lullaby of waves lapping at the hull. There's a hypnotic rhythm here, the splash of the pole, the creak of the wood, the sigh of the current. It feels like the river itself is cradling you, carrying you into a dream. Somewhere behind you, Ano, you fall in step with the caravan, the rhythm oddly comforting. The wheels creak in steady cadence, the oxen snort and sigh, and the drivers banter in sing-song tones. Dust rises in lazy clouds, turning the air golden under the sun. It's hypnotic, like a giant lullaby written by wood and muscle. Of course, quirks always sneak in. Some carts have little bells tied to their yokes, jingling like offbeat percussion in the caravan's endless symphony. One driver, perhaps bored from days on the road, has painted faces on his oxen's foreheads. They look faintly amused, as though they too are in on the joke. Another cart carries a rooster tied on top, crowing indignantly every few minutes, as if announcing the caravan's arrival to every village in a 10-mile radius. Travel wasn't just business, it was survival. Caravans moved in groups partly for safety. Bandits haunted these roads, waiting for a chance to plunder. But together, the drivers formed a moving fortress. Spears leaned against cart sides. Watchmen walked with alert eyes. And at night, they circled the carts into makeshift enclosures. Sitting by one such fire, you notice how drivers share not only food but gossip: who raised taxes, which roads washed away in floods, which towns were worth stopping in for good grain prices. Information traveled with the oxen as much as the goods did. As you listen, you feel the rhythm seeping into your body. The slow, steady pace of the oxen is almost meditative. You imagine lying down in one of the carts, on top of grain sacks that smell faintly of earth and sun, swaying with the movement. The creaks become lullabies, the bells little dream signals, the oxen's breathing a soft chorus pulling you into sleep. But there's also a weight here. These journeys weren't fast. They could take weeks, even months. Imagine watching the same road stretch endlessly, moving only as quickly as two animals decided to walk. Yet, in that slowness, there's a strange peace. The world doesn't rush you. It just keeps rolling along, one creak, one snort, one cloud of dust at a time. By the time the caravan halts at a dusty crossroad, you feel almost reluctant to leave. You've grown used to the lull of wheels and bells, the unhurried certainty that, no matter how slow, the road always leads somewhere. Section 11. The road tilts upward into hills, their rocky spines jutting out like sleeping beasts. Your legs ache just looking at the climb. But before you can grumble too much, you hear a peculiar sound, deep groans mixed with the rhythmic thud of padded feet. Then you see them, camels. A line of them sways toward you, each one loaded with bundles tied in cloth, jars clinking softly, and sacks of spices bulging against rope bindings. Their long necks bob with an almost mocking rhythm, as if they're humming, "We could do this all day." Traders walk beside them shouting commands, though the camels look like they're pretending not to listen. In northern and western India, especially Rajasthan, camels were the lifeline of travel. Where bullock carts failed in sand and horses struggled in the heat, these desert ships trudged steadily forward. They carried salt, textiles, grain, even messages across lands where water was as rare as kindness in a tax collector's smile. Scholars still argue whether camels came into widespread Indian use through early desert trade or through later contact with Central Asia. But the truth is simple. Once you saw one in action, you didn't forget it. Of course, patient is a myth. Quirky detail incoming. Camels are the drama queens of the animal world. They sit down and refuse to budge when annoyed, roll their eyes like sulky teenagers, and spit, yes, spit, if they really want to make a point. Imagine hailing your ride, only for it to collapse theatrically on the ground until you apologized. You walk alongside the caravan, and the air changes. It's drier here, the wind sharp, carrying the tang of dust and sun-baked stone. The camel's feet land almost soundlessly, but their saddles creak, their jaws grind slowly as they chew, and together it creates a strange, steady rhythm. Before long, you realize it's hypnotic. Each sway rocks you into half-drowsiness, like being cradled by a giant, invisible hammock. By nightfall, the traders tie the camels in a circle and light small fires. Sparks leap upward, merging with a sky littered with stars so bright they look close enough to pluck. Men swap stories of mirages that fooled them into chasing phantom lakes, of thieves who scattered the moment a camel bellowed, of markets where a single bale of salt was worth its weight in silver. The flames crackle, the animals grunt, and the desert hums with its own lullaby. You lie back on the cool sand, staring upward. The Milky Way sprawls across the night like a spilled river of diamonds, and the sound of camels chewing in the background becomes strangely comforting. Their slow rhythm blends with the fire's hiss, and soon your body feels like it's floating not on water this time, but on air and silence. When dawn blushes across the horizon, the caravan stirs. Camels rise awkwardly to their feet, one leg at a time, groaning like grumpy old men forced to wake too early. And yet, once they start moving, their stride is steady again, endless and unhurried. You follow, knowing this desert rhythm will echo inside you long after the sands are behind. Section 12. By the time you leave the camel caravan behind, the land softens again, sand giving way to soil, jagged hills melting into flat, fertile plains. The air feels heavier here, thick with the smell of crops and smoke curling from village cookfires. And then, just when you think you'll be back to trudging alone, the ground beneath your feet shifts. Literally, you've stepped onto stone. Stretching before you is a wide causeway of carved blocks, laid so carefully they still hold firm centuries later. You realize, with a start, that this is no ordinary road. It's part of an ancient trade route, the kind rulers poured wealth into, ensuring armies, merchants, and pilgrims could move faster and safer. Think of the Grand Trunk Road, for instance, the legendary artery stretching from Bengal to the farthest reaches of the Northwest. In your mind's eye, you can almost see it buzzing. Soldiers marching in rows, horsemen galloping past with urgent messages, merchants dragging carts, monks walking barefoot, their shadows long in the dust. Scholars still argue whether such grand highways were primarily military investments or economic lifelines. But either way, they stitched regions together like thread through cloth. Walking on stone feels different. Each step rings faintly, like the road itself is humming. On either side, you spot milestones, small carved pillars marking distances, some worn smooth by centuries of weather. Quirky fact: these milestones weren't just practical. Some were inscribed with prayers or warnings, like ancient motivational posters. Rest here, weary traveler. Or, beware thieves beyond this point. Imagine your GPS app suddenly flashing a reminder that says, "Good luck with the bandits." The road is lively. A royal messenger on horseback thunders past, dust flying from his heels. A group of wandering monks shuffle along, heads bowed, chanting under their breath. Farmers trudge with bundles of sugarcane balanced across their shoulders. Somewhere ahead, you hear the clatter of iron shoes, maybe a caravan with oxen or horses moving supplies. It feels like you're not walking on a road, so much as flowing with a river of people. At a shady grove along the side, you find one of the old resting points built by kings and wealthy patrons, serai, or inns. You step under the archway, and it's like entering a different world. Cool stone walls, a courtyard with a well in the center, merchants lounging with their turbans unwrapped, animals tied in neat rows. The air smells of lentil stew simmering in a clay pot. For a weary traveler, this is paradise. You sit against a wall, watching life swirl around you. A storyteller entertains children with exaggerated tales of flying horses. A trader unwraps a bundle of saffron, the air instantly perfumed with gold. A guard cleans his sword with bored precision. You could close your eyes here and let the murmur of voices, the clink of bowls, the rustle of straw, and the gentle snorts of resting oxen lull you to sleep. But you don't stay long. The road calls again, stretching endlessly forward. You step back onto the stone, your feet echoing in time with countless others who've walked this way before. There's a strange comfort in that, the knowledge that you're part of something larger, a procession of travelers spanning centuries. The milestones stand like silent witnesses, reminding you that though journeys change, the longing to move, to see, to reach, never really does. And as the sun sinks low, casting long golden shadows across the stone. You realize the road itself feels alive, a heartbeat beneath your soles, a whisper in your ears, a promise that as long as there's a horizon, there will be someone walking toward it. Section 13. The stone road gradually fades into earthen tracks again, and before long, you notice the air shifting warmer, filled with the faint tang of spices and smoke. You've entered a bustling market town, the kind where roads split into narrow lanes, stalls crowded with goods, and every corner is a cacophony of voices. Travelers, merchants, and villagers collide in a steady, unorganized rhythm. Yet somehow the chaos hums along like a well-practiced symphony. You step carefully, avoiding carts piled high with grain and sugarcane, and the occasional stray goat. The smell of fried snacks drifts past you, pakoras sizzling in oil, sweet jalebis dripping with syrup, roasted peanuts filling cloth sacks. Vendors call out, offering their wares with practiced charm. One old man waves a bundle of turmeric in your direction, claiming it's the secret